Welcome to the Spirit of Truth video podcast. I know it's been a while, but we're back with good cheer because joining me today from Alsea, Oregon is my good friend, Michael Hill. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, Derek, I'm fine. How are you? Good to see you again.
I'm great. All right, well, stick around as we get to know Michael and all his amazing ministry and good cheer that he spreads everywhere he goes. Welcome back. So, like I said, joining us from Alsea, Oregon is my good friend, Michael Hill. All right, Michael, it's great to finally have you on here.
Thanks for having me, Derek. That's very kind of you.
Well, not everyone knows Mr. Michael Hill, but I'm very privileged with the opportunity to get to do some service with him. We'll get to talk about that in the show, but I was just hoping, Michael, that maybe you could just give us a little bit of history about you so we could get to know you, maybe how you found the Urantia Book or when you found the Urantia Book.
Sure. Well, I was raised in Southern California along the beaches of Santa Monica, Malibu. And I was raised a Christian Scientist, which is a blessing of sorts because it does not subject me to any of the guilt stuff that came with much of Catholicism. But I sort of fell out of that in my early adolescence, and then in my early mid-teens, I really sort of wanted, well, what's going on here? What's the deal? So I got very involved in occult kinds of things. I would go to a medium reader and would read very arcane books. And I remember being asked or being invited to go to an interview by some guru, and I was going to have my aura read to see if I was qualified to join this group. And in that interview, it came to me that, the big deal here was power, that there was an issue of power that sort of dominated the whole incident. And although I was accepted, I declined. And so with the idea that, so power's the big deal. So who has the most power? And so God, all right? So then who has the best rap on God? So that was the question that I was floating out in my life. So I read all of these, as I said, these arcane books that I was in my late teens, just turning into my 20s. And about that time, I moved into my first comfy hovel in Venice, California in 1964. And my partner at that time was working with my next door neighbor, who was a house painter, David Saunders. Some of you may remember him from long, long ago. I was over there one day, and he was sharing a joint with me. And he had this big blue book, and he said he was going to a meeting. Somebody was going to come pick him up, and that somebody was Polly Park in those days. So I asked him, so what's this meeting all about and all that? And he says, it's very obscure. You don't know. So eventually he let me take a look at it. And I said, this looks really cool. So when I was in Martindale's bookstore in Santa Monica, there just happened to be one right in the table that you walk in off the street. And I picked it up. It was the first edition. And I decided it was very expensive. It was $15. That was a lot of money in 1965. But I bought it. And I remember just starting and reading it. And it so pulled me in that I had to monitor myself at 2:00 in the morning and say, okay, you could only read one more paper and then you have got to get some sleep because you have to go to work tomorrow.
You were binging.
I was binging big time. So I read the whole book, and what was interesting, it was a trip. What was interesting is that I would read these things about the master force organizers or transcendental beings, or I didn't know what they were talking about, but it just rang true. This is good stuff. This is really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was a lone reader for a while, and then one day I looked up Urantia in the phone book and talked to Julia Fenderson, and she and I became buds. And I remember we started work on the first conference outside of Chicago at, I think it was Wally Ziegler's Brentwood Academy in the early 70s. So anyway,
Oh, wow.
so the
Wally Ziegler.
yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, I've got some of his games still over here in my garage. His board games.
Uh-huh.
You meet all sorts of great characters. That's one thing that I'm so blessed why I have this podcast, like get to meet people like you, and then filling in the links of history of this movement, because you've been around so long, and especially over there in the West Coast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, we had Larry Geis on the show.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And he was close with all of those LA and Pacific side people. So it's nice for me as younger in the movement. I'm not that young, but to fill this history in for me, and hopefully people who watch this show in the future, if they're searching to put the pieces of history together. So maybe you could, so you got the book, you were a lone reader, but then you got kind of connected in the scene a little bit. And then I know you're very studious, and you're a very intelligent individual, like you said. And so I read the book, but it's 2,000 pages. It's not like, it's like 12 episodes on Netflix or anything like that. This is a serious commitment to read the book.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then I got hooked into Urantia. What was it called then? FUSLA, First Urantia Society of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so, and that sort of got me into being with a lot of readers. And we were all young. We were all hippies in those days. And it was quite interesting because this is in the mid 60s to the mid 70s. There was a real wave of new readers. It was amazing. We were all, we're all gray heads now, but we weren't at those days. Yeah. So it's interesting to me to see how the youth of the world is now tuning into the book and getting that.
And what do you feel from that? What compared to how you guys were? I mean, it was different technology, different society and everything. I get that. But do you see different on-ramps to the book, or what's your perspective on youth engagement with Urantia Revelation?
Well, I see it by cultures or by nations. I don't see that so much in the United States, but I do see it in the Latin American countries. When I was asked to do a presentation for the Peruvian conference that is coming up in April, and I was really impressed by the number of youth, young kids in their teens, 20s, and 30s who are really avidly committed to understanding this book and sharing it with others. I have some contact with some of the readers in Africa, and they're equally as zealous, but they seem to be a little bit older, 30s and 40s.
Right.
And that's the extent of my knowledge right now. I don't do a lot of the international stuff.
Yeah, I've noticed similarities like that in the Philippines a bit growing, and I can't help but notice the similarity there is the family contribution. That it's almost like I've noticed certain whole families will study together. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like a built-in study group in your household.
Yes.
And then you can kind of work things out. I'm privileged with the opportunity to have roommates and people who I live near who can constantly talk about this stuff with me. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Doug Parker and Anthony Finstead sometimes come over. We'll have a weekend together. And it is so nice to just, whatever you're doing in the day, if some thought about some aspect of deity or divinity comes up, and you can just talk about it. It's just like, well, pass me the sugar, or where's the hole, or whatever. It's just great to have that flow of questions and discussions. It's
yeah. Well, keeping with that flow. Okay, so just following with that history of you, so maybe we could put together a sequence of events of finding the Urantia book to taking on service and wanting to teach, wanting to serve, wanting to help. Maybe you could take us along that travels for you, that journey.
Sure. I think it started, then I got involved with Polly Friedman, and she and I ended up starting the School of Meanings and Values, I think in the late 70s, I can't remember when, which was a real nice alternative. It was, it worked really well, and I began to start doing presentations both at the ICs and at regional conferences. And so that really broadened my base of getting to know Urantia Book readers. And that actually ended up playing a role in our moving from Santa Monica to LC, because we have 3 couples up here who I've known for, 20 years before we moved here that are good readers. Cindy Scott, her husband Al, Tom Alexander and his wife Nancy, and Doug Parker and his wife at the time, Lissa. And I said, well, how nice to be able to move and be with a community of readers. So that was the first big thing. And I think in terms of service, I know when I moved back into Santa Monica, I mean, I say this because my family was a pioneering family in Santa Monica in the 1870s. So that's sort of my basic roots. And when I moved back into Santa Monica, I had this commitment to become involved in my community. So I joined a community-based organization and learned meeting skills and how to work with governments. I stopped doing presentations after, probably in the 90s. And then I got much more involved in my vocational work. I was a licensed marriage, family, and child counselor. And I was also a high school teacher for teenage gangsters in Venice, which was probably the best job I've ever had in my life. And just as a funny aside, an interesting aside, recently, one of my kids, he was 17, was convicted of murder. He pulled 25 to life. And I've been writing him for 25 years. And in his last letter, he wrote me that he'd just been approved for parole. So he'll get paroled in the next 120 days after 25 years. And also, I coordinate the fellowship's inmate correspondence program. There's 5 of us. Dick Bay.
Let's. I mean, that's a good launching point. But I just want to kind of set the stage for something like that. Maybe we could pivot to that because I can see obviously valuable service that you do, and I have the privilege to be in the office in the fellowship where we get to work together. Where you guys have put together quite a valuable ministry where you're getting Urantia books to people in prisons.
Yes.
Yeah. And so this is like a thing that not only is the Pipeline of Light a valuable program for the Urantia Book Fellowship, but with that philosophy of getting books to people who can't afford them. You guys are giving books to people who are at really low times in their life and don't have any money. Right. And so the level of this service is really a second mile type of thing. So I just want to really tell you how much I appreciate what you do and your whole team, Michael, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And I'm lucky enough to get to read some of those letters from the prison inmates. And I know you're changing lives and helping truth to change lives. So God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay. Now, sorry, I jumped on your thunder, but now could you please maybe explain to us what it is that you do in your prison ministry service?
Okay. So I've been doing this now about 4 years. And so inmates somehow find out about the book and they manage to get a piece of paper and a pencil, which is difficult to do for some of these inmates. They're very indigent. And they'll write to the foundation, either asking for more information about the book or asking for a book themselves. Derek bundles those letters up and sends them to me. I check out where they really are to make sure that they're still incarcerated, that the date or the address on the envelope is the same as the one that the state says that's where they are. And then I parcel the institutions out. There's 5 of us: Dick Bain, Mike Schneider, Don Guymond, Joy Brandt, who does the Spanish ones, and myself. And we each have a particular institution in a particular state. So I think in the 4 years I've been doing it, or it will be 4 years this year, I've put in 738 inmates. So I read 738 letters so far.
Wow.
And it is something to think that here is somebody that has really fallen off the tracks and ended up in prison, and yet has seen this book and are motivated to actually write a letter asking for a copy. I am moved by that. And whether they read one page or the book 5 times, the book is off the shelf in a warehouse and in a place where it is needed and wanted. So I feel very, very good about this ministry. And I know that all 5 of us feel very blessed to have this opportunity to serve this way.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that we've all developed a certain collection of ongoing readers, inmate readers, that just the correspondence has been continuing. And I have about a dozen guys that I write regularly to. They write back, and we have questions, we have discussions. It's quite nice. Some of them have mental issues that I do my best. Jesus said to serve those the least. So these guys are really struggling with just a basic grip on reality. And some of them have really turned their lives around in these wonderful ways, to read how they've reflected on their behaviors and used the teachings in the book and the help of the Spirit of truth in their gestures to make their lives be better. It's very, very touching.
Yeah, it is. It's quite remarkable. I mean, from my perspective, I'm seeing the rapid growth of requests for Urantia books inside prisons. And when you talk about power, originally, we're starting to see the power of revelation, of truth, working with spirit, with people, and maybe people who have misjudged what real power is earlier in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe could you share a little bit of, maybe is there commonality, or is there any common theme or something that stands out to you in some of these letters that you're starting to notice that is affecting people?
Well, there's always a group that describes themselves as having a spiritual life that they want to develop or want to expand, that they're searching for truth. And certainly in all of my letters of the guys that I assigned to myself, I always comment that I recognize and appreciate their recognition of their efforts to seek ye the truth, and that I try to give them some pointers on places to look in the book. There's that. Also, a lot of them, not a lot, there is a group that hears voices, that describes experiences of visitations and seeing angels. There's a small group of those guys. And there's some guys that just write a couple of lines. A buddy of mine inside had a book, and can you send me one, please? Thank you.
Right. Yeah. That's what I've seen. Sometimes I crack those letters open and read them, especially if they're in Colorado.
Right.
And I do have more to send you. I know I just sent you some yesterday, and there's more.
Yeah, you did. I just actually just sent them out today. And every once in a while you get a real stunning one. I think the one that I like the most is this guy scribbled, this young fellow, and he said, "Can you please send me whatever it is that you sent my dad up on the 3rd floor? All these guys are talking about it, and I want one too."
Oh, wow.
Father to son.
Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate that. Well, Michael Hill, I always appreciate how you keep such good cheer in doing this service, because sometimes when I do service in some pretty dark places, I can get pretty depressed. I'm still pretty sensitive. Mm-hmm. And I'm always blown away by how happy you are.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, maybe, could you maybe shed a little light on how some of us could be happy in dark places like that too?
Well, two things. I can tell you how it is that I decided this. I mean, there was a time in my life when things were pretty rough, and I had to sit myself down and sort of say, like, dude, come on, let's figure this out. And in that time of serious, profound reflection and sincere self-criticism, I realized a couple of things. One, that I was in my early 20s, that I would pursue I would take up the pursuit of truth, that whether that was right or whether it was wrong, I was going to put all my eggs in the pursuit truth basket. I thought, that's a good thing. I'm going to commit myself to that. I committed myself to knowing what I thought, what were my thoughts and feelings about things, and also how to express that in a way that was pleasing to me. And then a few years later, I think, when I was reading the Jesus Papers for the whatever number of times, Jesus's urge to be of good cheer, and I said, I can take that one on. I can do that. And so that's I've done that. You know, it's my mind. I can direct it the way I want. These are my feelings. I could say, no, we're not going to go down that road. We're going to have a cheerful approach to things.
Well, okay, now that's important. I think what you just shared right there is the understanding of your personality taking control of your mind.
Yes.
And making decisions there instead of being a victim to some reoccurring thought process or something like that.
Well, make no mistake that, I mean, I still play records in my head sometimes. I mean, I've learned techniques to stop that. It doesn't happen very often. I certainly have knee-jerk emotional reactions, but I don't let them out of this. You know, I'm a mammal. I'm going to have all of those aggressive traits, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But I can say, wait a minute, I'm not going to give that voice. And so I've learned to keep my mouth shut a lot of times. Highly recommended, by the way.
I'm still learning. I'm sorry to everyone.
No, yeah.
Well, it just reminds me about what Jesus said. He said, it's not that what enters your mouth that can defile one's soul, but that which comes out of your mouth.
Right.
And that's still that you have this personal free will to choose what's coming out, what you share.
Right. And that's part of the whole value choosing process that we go through, that conditions our decisions and then our subsequent actions, that we realize that this is not a good way for me to deal with my emotions, that I need to be more clear on the intercession of my mind in managing those emotions that come up that are not good ones. As I said, I'm a mammal. I'm the beast within continues. But I can keep him under control. I can manage him. And what's interesting is with that attitude, over time, the beast rears his head less and less often. Because I've conditioned myself that, you know, that's not a road I'm going to pursue.
So it's been habitual then?
It's become that way. I mean, I can keep my mouth shut. You know, and then I will share also that sometimes when I have issues that come up between friends, that I'll spend however much time it takes me to find a way to deal with that issue in a way that I think Jesus would approve. And I got to tell you, you know, asking myself, what would Jesus do in this situation is a gold mine of insight, and invites the spirit of truth and my adjuster and really all the spirit influences to sort of say, oh, this guy is serious about wanting to figure out what's the best path to go forward in this particular incident.
Amen. Yeah, it's real truth. And it's a shared experience that you and I can both talk about. I know for me, when I invite Jesus to show me the way, it's usually I'm finding myself wanting to do things that are much more compassionate and mercy dominant, mercy filled. Nothing that is so self-directed, but more what would this person need or something like that. And it's something that is more of friendliness. So the more the friend comes out, a good friend.
Yeah, right. And well, good is really the operative word there, because it is goodness. It's acts of goodness that you do as you pass by. And it also, it for me, wanted to learn to be gracious. I have a friend who is the epitome of graciousness, and I am always stunned when I am with her at how, I mean, she's a woman of means, how gracious, how kind, how generous she is in her attentions to others. So that's another good one to pursue, is graciousness. That's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just let me just add, Derek, my experience of you is that you've always been a good, kind person. That's
always.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
As long as I've known you, and in the circumstances I have known you, yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's easy to be of high character when you're around high character people.
Yes, that's true. It calls upon you to be one of them. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing. Yeah.
And I think that reminds me a little bit about what you were talking about of what would Jesus do? You know, you're kind of opening the door to that high quality of character that the influence showing the way that is right. You know?
And it's also, it demonstrates our commitment to doing the Father's will. Jesus was the Father's will. You know, just as my gesture is the Father's will to me, and that whole turning of one's attention to the spiritual side of life for solutions, for answers, for guidance, for strength is like how can you not do that?
Yeah. Well, you could not be introduced to it in a way. Well, maybe you could help us. Like, were you praying before you found the Urantia Book? Obviously, because you're searching, right?
Well, I mean, I bought into Sunday school. I loved Sunday school when I was a little kid. I mean, I had a great Sunday school teacher. I mean, she was wonderful. And so I took that stuff in, and I do remember, you know, at 6 and 7, sincerely praying. And actually, I have a miracle story if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, I was in the 7th grade, so I was 10 or 11, I guess. And I was in my math class, and I was picking my teeth with a straight pin. Not, you know, I was a kid, so we do stupid things. And the teacher announced an upcoming test the coming Friday. And I went, oh, just in sort of pretending. Well, in that, I inhaled this straight pin into my
my God.
No pain. I stayed at school the rest of the day.
Dude, you stayed in school?
Well,
oh my goodness. You weren't, jeez, you didn't want to put a burden on anyone, huh?
Right, exactly. like I, you know, we'll figure this out, but today we have to be in school.
Wow.
So I got home, I told my mom, and she took me to the doctor, and sure enough, they took an x-ray, and here's this straight pin in one of my bronchial tubes. So this is in the mid 50s. So they took me to Children's Hospital because that was the place that dealt with things like this, and they took more x-rays, and so then they were going to go in and they were going to stick this thing down my throat with a little tube with a magnet in it and pick it up and take it out. So we went in to do this, and because I was a little kid, they couldn't keep the x-ray machine on because it does bad things to growing bodies. Well, they couldn't find it. So they sent me back to x-ray, and of course, in the meantime, this was an awful experience being in this hospital. So I remember praying sincerely that, dear Father, please get this out of me whatever way. Now, I know that these things, the book talks about prayer with regards to the physical world is, no, that's kind of iffy. We don't want to go there. We want to go for the strength to deal with that, for the guidance to deal with whatever situation. Well, so we get the x-rays back from the second time, and now this pin is in my intestines.
Oh my God.
And so they couldn't figure out what could he possibly have done that would have brought this pin up to his throat so that he could swallow it down into his intestines. So they did a white paper on me, and I went home, and sure enough, I passed it, and everything was fine. But I always felt that it was. I was a sincere believer as a kid. I really was. They talk about being like a little kid. Well, I was a little kid, and I was that way. I was trusting and faithful, and so that's
you prayed and believed, huh?
Yeah, that's my miracle story.
That is a miracle. The fact that the most uncomfortable experience in all of that was dealing with the hospital.
Oh yeah. Oh, you don't. Ooh.
Oh, I know, but it could be a lot worse. You're talking about a pin in very vulnerable areas. Oh wow. Well, I'm glad you're okay, Michael. That's cool.
Me too.
All right. Well, let's pivot.
Yes.
Shall we?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about maybe some of the work that you're doing now outside of the prison ministry and more of an educational contribution.
Okay. All right. So I am a retired teacher, and I have been reading the book for a long, long time. So I started doing classes for UBIS. I took a couple classes with them. This is about 6 or 7 years ago. And so I did my first class with them was on deity, God, and divinity, because those are the words in the foreword that say we have the most problems or the greatest confusion. So I did a course in that.
So just to be clear, so you're educating within Urantia context.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was a teacher. I taught teenage gangsters, and that was a real trip, I got to tell you.
That was the real hardcore Urantia training, education, and now it's this.
Well, it was. Well, just a couple of sides about that.
Sure.
My favorite story of all, of course, so I'm this tall white guy in this class with all minorities, all black, all brown, and we're in Venice, and I have this great staff, a couple of Hispanics, and I have this old friend of mine, a white woman, great Montessori teacher. So it was a great setup. I had lots of connections in the community, so I could really do cool things for their graduation. But my favorite story of all stories is when this young kid came in, because high schools would kick them out. I mean, they'd come in with 3 years of all Fs. It's like, did you realize this kid was having a problem? So that's the kind of kid that I would get. And or they would come out of camp and they would come to me. So this young kid comes in, he's about 15 and has a serious attitude, and comes in and he sort of marches in the door and says, all right, who's the dickhead that runs this place? So of course I'm standing right there, and I say, well, that would be me, but it's Mr. Dickhead to you. Because the class is always watching how the teacher's going to deal with any situation. And that, that's my favorite funny story of that. So anyway, so I created classes for adults learning how to read. I did all kinds of stuff. So then I applied those skills using the Urantia book as my text in creating courses for UBIS and then for UUI, Urantia University Incorporated. So I've done my class on the forward about 4 or 5 times, and I've just finished one on self-mastery, circle attainment, and true faith, which I'm going to reprise in April with just a 4-week version on self-mastery and circle attainment. And it is wonderful. You get students from all over the world and do Zoom calls. It's just great.
Well, with this whole introduction of meeting and studying and gathering online more available to us now, how are you finding that that's changing how education is for you, as far as how you're teaching these Urantia concepts? Because these are still pretty complex concepts that you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. The forward is everybody sort of thinks that is a real challenge, and it is a real challenge. So the UBIS format is 4 2-week sessions. 1 week you read and answer questions. The second week is discussion. And so when I do the course, I always have a Zoom call at the end of the discussion week. So those nagging questions can come out. And that's very, very, very helpful. With UUI, we do an introductory video. So there's somebody talking about the context. Like, this is what it's the old teacher thing. This is what we're going to study. This is what we're studying. This is what we just did study. And so, and the video exchange and the Zoom exchange are really helpful in letting the students sort of sense more the humanity of their fellow students and certainly of me. And it allows us to spend more time with the material and really more specific questions. I like it a lot. I like it a lot.
Well, are you finding, because you said people from all around the world, are you finding a growth from maybe parts of the world where you weren't expecting it as far as student engagement?
Well, I don't know that I had any expectations. It's always, Malta was interesting. There's this guy in Malta, and I've had a couple from Nigeria and Uganda, and Poland. I had a really good guy from Poland a little while back who sort of runs the UB stuff up in Poland. He was really good. He's a lot of fun.
Wow.
So it's finding new brothers and sisters all over the world that you get to talk with. And it's just great. And then some of them, I've maintained relationships over the years, and we still email each other back and forth. What about this? Or I just read this. What do you think that means? And it's
well, it takes people like you to keep the continuity of excitement over this content, because as we're getting into the future, no, I'm just kidding, but as we're getting into something where I think people are a little bit more separated from the textile work of hands-on book reading and sharing, face-to-face gathering in the same space, and we're kind of getting a little separated by that, which kind of tethers us. But yet this quality of thinking that's growing into this unseen tethering that we truly are a part of also. So how do you see your place going forward in physical community? Because I know that you're active in the Pacific Northwest, in those societies for the fellowship, and you've been really active of bringing other societies together and interesting people for good fellowship. Is there any plans, or do you have any goals or anything like that going forward?
Okay, so I'm co-chair with Barb Mayer of the UC Now, Urantia Communities Northwest. And we put on a gathering every 3 years. You were at the last one. You did a wonderful video, which was really excellent. And I want to thank you again for that. There was much praise given to that when it got around.
Thank you.
It was really good.
Thank you.
We would do one this year because it's our 3-year cycle. However, with COVID, and we're a gray-head bunch of people, we thought, let's put this off. We did find a nice site in Washington on the beach. So I think that next year in 2022, we'll actually pull that off. We usually get about 90 people. It's 3 nights, and it's just study and fellowship and joy and just being together with like-minded, spirit-led brothers and sisters. That's hard to beat.
It is. Have you gone to any other maybe conferences or expos or events, maybe Parliament of World Religions, where you're around fellow believers, but maybe it's not to the exact degree of intricate knowledge as the Urantia book that you could share, but there's still this belief and a kinship that comes with it?
Well, I used to go to all the ICs. I started back in, I think it was the one in Bowdoin, Maine. I forgot when that was. It's about 30 years ago. And then I think I sort of stopped with the one in Los Angeles because there were changes in my life. So that was a regular part of my life. And I would, as I said, I would do presentations at those as well. And then,
I mean outside of the Urantia community, like in the interfaith type of.
Oh,
setting.
yeah. Yes, actually, our local newspapers. We have two communities nearby, Corvallis and the community of Albany, and the papers are managed by the same company, and they each have they have an interfaith column, and they've asked me to write for them. So now I've done two articles for them about the Urantia book, only the Urantia book,
Oh, wow.
in their interfaith thing, and then I'll do another one for them in April. So it seems like I'm kind of part of the mix now in terms of there's another spiritual approach to finding God, and this is what it's about. And I'm pretty out there about it. Urantia book is revelation, guys. That's just what it is. It's
Yeah.
and
Right on.
and it's not foreign. I mean, every religious group, sect, organization refers to revelatory input. Everybody talks about angels. So, the Urantia book is revelation. That's what it is, guys.
Well, did you find that it was easier for you to maybe wrap your head around that concept, having your Sunday school background and your Catholic background or Christian background? Because when I grew up Roman Catholic, when I read the Urantia book, just as an example, there was concepts and terms that I was already familiar with.
Oh yeah. I don't know so much that it was the intellectual part as it was the spiritual experiential part, because as I said, I was a faith kid. So I already had the experience of faith in a loving God and believing that to be absolutely real. Thus the ease at prayer, because I know that I'm talking to God. I know that.
Wow.
So in that sense, from the experiential sense, yes, I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding of the theology at that time. So reading the Urantia book was I didn't know the Trinity. Yeah, we didn't talk about the Trinity. So
well, you do now. Now you teach about the Trinity.
Yes, the impersonal Trinity. Yes.
Well, do you have an elevator pitch on explaining the Trinity to a noob or to someone who maybe isn't?
Well, it's like let's form a corporation, and actually that is the term the book uses, is that it's a corporation, and the corporation makes decisions. And interestingly enough, the Father and the corporation can talk, the Son and the corporation can talk, the Infinite Spirit and the corporation can talk, but the three of them can't talk to the corporation at the same time. Which is well, okay, I'm fine with that. The Trinity deals with the impersonal aspect of deity, which we experience as justice, mercy, and sovereignty. I believe justice, power, and sovereignty, I think is what they're called. The mercy is part of our experience of deity, love, mercy, and service, I think. And then we comprehend deity as truth, beauty, and goodness.
Wow.
So
I'm reflecting on Trinity, and that's what I like about what you were just talking about. Is from my experience, is the experience of knowing I am, and what that is a reflection of knowing in a unified sense, but it's really in my mind I'm aware of the Trinity, but I can only really talk to it as one. Right. I only feel it as one, and so I only think it as one, but I'm sure aware of Elohim in plurality of deity. But so that's why it's kind of interesting to talk about when we're explaining these concepts of spiritual identity. I appreciate modern day parables like a corporation or something like that, because I think it's challenging, because there aren't a lot of answers for people where there's these questions that the Urantia book fills in. So the more that we can be that bridge of understanding and sharing, then the more people can come on board to their real identity, I feel like.
Yeah, I think the approach that I use with people is it just like, well, what sort of spiritual life do you have for yourself?
Mm.
Or I use the phrase, well, my faith teaches me, so I own my experience, and this is how it is for me from a faith thing. Or the issue about just talk to God, like, he's the grocer, the cashier. He's your friend. Just, have a chat with a buddy.
Yeah, that seems to be a counterintuitive concept to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, you're supposed to be pious, and, actually, it's kind of almost heresy for you to directly talk to God. No.
You got to make an appointment with the secretary first, wait a few months. If he's got some time and you gave the right offerings, then maybe you can get an appointment.
Right. Get a letter from your mother. So it's for me, the whole thing is have a relationship with God, have a relationship with the Father. Just talk. Doing the will of God, they say, is nothing more than sharing the inner life with Him. And so involve Him in your thinking. Just always, that part of true faith is uncompromising moral consciousness. Well, you can do that if you invite a spiritual light to always shine on the decisions that you're making. It's very clear when that shadow of a hair's turning moves into falsehood, and you're kind of straying off the trail because you kind of don't want to deal with it as straight on. So you have to spend some time with yourself to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? And the more you do that, the more habitual it becomes, and then it just becomes how you are. At least that's how it's been for me.
No, I can relate to that, and the spending time with the choice of trying to share the inner thinking with God. Because like what you're talking about is this enlightened thinking, and then hopefully this enlightened honesty that comes forth from choosing to reflect with God's company and talking to and discussing, just as you and I are talking right now. Right. I'm changed from that. And it was worth it for me to call you on this. And hopefully it was worth it for people at home who are watching, because this is how things really change, is personal relationships and investment in your soul and other people's souls. And I don't know. I just am always looking for opportunities to be able to explain it in a way that is easily to grasp, but yet has enough power that there's understanding that there's depth there, right? Because I always fear that we get too caught up in just the witty one-liners or the fortune cookie fortunes, and we don't have that depth of understanding from experience that really warrants those words and really validates those things.
Right. God only loves you is one that I pull out a lot. That's it, And I think with people that have been raised in a more formal religion where the Bible has played such a big role, I always talk about my understanding of the Bible, that the Old Testament is the God of Moses, the God of wrath, the God to be feared, the eye for an eye, and that the New Testament is the testament of Jesus, a God of love. We're brothers and sisters in this. We turn the other cheek. We have the golden rule. And you can't have both. You're either going to go with the God of Moses that's wrathful and to be feared, or you're going to go with the God of Jesus. If you're going to have a God, choose a good one. Or who was it? Somebody was telling me that one of their strategies was when they're talking to somebody and they would say, I don't believe in God. And her comment was, well, so tell me about this God you don't believe in.
Oh, yeah.
That's very cool. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, so, Paula would talk about that a lot.
Yeah, who is this guy? Was it Paula that said that?
Uh-huh.
That is excellent. So
it's good outreach. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and I heard it from Gart Jameson too. That's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
line. Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot of outreach at booths and Urantia booths, and you get youth that come up, and you can almost feel the prejudice towards the word God,
Right.
and that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. We gotta accept people where they are. There's all sorts of on ramps for people who are searching in this revelation, and sooner or later they accept the loving presence that has always been there, whatever it takes, whether it's ancient aliens or the thought adjuster papers, whatever you want to find in the Urantia book.
Right.
But it comes down to, and that's why I see the importance of this show, relationships, and relationships with the first, with God, to the last, and as we learn through Jesus that he is that bridge from the first to the last, from time to eternity. And I'm curious, for being such a committed person to following Jesus, have you noticed a progression in your understanding of the personal nature of Jesus?
Well,
Your actual relationship with the person, or the personality of Jesus in your life.
It's his balance. He truly loved everybody. He loved Judas, and he was of good cheer. I mean, yes, he wept. Yes, there's 2 instances when he wept, and that's the human side of his. We weep at the loss of the possibilities of the open door to those who turn their backs. Like the Sanhedrin did. Or we weep at what we know will happen because of something, like with Lazarus, when he was going, he knew the kind of life Lazarus would have after he'd been raised. So, I mean, Jesus is my buddy. I'll be out. I mean, they're my buddies. God and Jesus are my buddies. I talk to them when I'm gardening. We laugh together. If I'm having a really, really good day, I say, well, is there anything I can do to help? I mean, I got some spare time.
I'm good. Do you guys need anything now?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right.
Well, that's interesting, though. I wanted to ask you, because people don't know, you're out in Oregon and you have a pretty vast garden that you work on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And maybe you could share with us a little bit of your spiritual practice out there, your life.
Well, working, on the one hand, to be able to do courses in the Urantia book, or on the Urantia book, and to do this inmate program, to do UC Now, and to do presentations sometimes, to balance that with, pruning and weeding and digging in the mud and getting organic fertilizer and doing composting and moving the raspberries and planting new strawberries and doing the summer planting and the winter planting and the spring planting. I mean, being in the dirt at the same time that I'm growing my soul, I don't know how it is that I got such a wonderful life, because for a long time I wasn't really sure about that.
Wow. Yeah,
I am so blessed, and I know that I have worked hard in my life. I know that I have persevered, but it just doesn't seem like that explains it completely at all. If I talk too much about it, I start to cry. So,
well, I know the feeling. I can relate in that.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to comment on what beautiful opportunities for all these metaphors for your soul development in the soil of how you can create a loving, unconditional loving soil that can nurture the soul. And part of that is, I feel, cultivating that relationship with God, because that's, if you can have an unconditional loving soil for your soul in that relationship that really kind of gives you a bastion of security and eternal identity that can't be messed with in a material way.
That is so true, Derek. When things have been a little difficult these past 4 years, and to know that I can come home and step away from that melee of life into the beauty that surrounds me. All I ever hear are, like last night I was sitting in the living room in front of the fireplace, the window was open, and all I could hear are the frogs and the rain. You know, the peace and quiet. I mean, I lived here 9 years alone, and it was like being a monk for 9 years. I could go 4 or 5 days without seeing another human being, and it was just perfectly fine. Wow. I mean, I was a very social creature. I still am, but boy, being able to be alone with the dirt and God, it just doesn't get any better, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
And to raise food. You know, I mean, I have a hay pasture, and buddy in the neighborhood cuts my hay, bales my hay, and a farmer in the other valley comes and picks it up, and we get to talk about life, and you know, and then we grow a lot of berries, and we put those up and sell them to the local mercantile and give them a bunch away. It's just, you know, like that's a wonderful thing to do. It's joyful. It's joyous.
Good for you.
You have to come out. You haven't come out here.
I know. I plan on it one of these days.
Oh yeah, be prepared to work. It is a working farm.
I'll pick some apples.
You'll do more than that, Derek.
Okay, yes, sir. Take advantage of the young, strong guy, why don't you? Okay.
Thank you so very much. Yes, exactly correct. Right. Yep.
Maybe I'll have to bring a posse up with me.
Sure. We can house. We have. I think the most we've done is 13 for 3 or 4 days.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we have a lot of bathrooms.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
All right. Well, Michael Hill, this has been awesome, and I'm going to let you go.
Thank you so much, sir.
Please continue.
It's been wonderful. Derek, it's just you do such a wonderful thing with this program. I so admire your perseverance and your efforts in making this program be real and happening and available to the world. It's Spirit of Truth. Way to go, dude.
Thank you, my brother. And I'm like you, just super blessed and just trying to do a little bit. It's just a fraction of what I've been blessed with, and hopefully it'll grow and my capacities will grow and we can really share the truth. So I pray that the Spirit of Truth will work with us always. And it's always great to have a brother like you serving on the ground with all of us. May God bless you always. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
You too, Derek. Thank you.
All right. And thank you guys for joining us. I know it's been a while, but it's good to see you guys again. Please subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you next time. God bless.